Thank you all for joining us. We're going to get started in probably just a minute here. Let people trickle in. Welcome to today's webinar, Plant-Based Eating to Fight Diabetes. We're so pleased to have you here today. Just to give you a little bit of background, for those of you who aren't familiar with Oldways, we're a nonprofit nutrition education organization whose mission is to inspire people to embrace the healthy and sustainable joys of the old ways of eating. And before I turn things over to our wonderful speaker, I'm just going to go over some housekeeping notes. So yes, this session is being recorded, and you will receive the recording video, the slides, as well as the CPEU certificate for dietitians within 1 week. So keep an eye out on your emails. If not tomorrow, then early next week, you'll be receiving that. And you can also check our website, oldwayspt.org/CPEU. That's where we save all the recordings and slides and have more information. And so stay tuned as we announce our next webinars in our webinar series soon in the weeks to come. But until then, I will turn it over to Sharon Palmer, the Plant-Powered Dietitian. Take it away, Sharon.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks everyone for joining me as I talk about plant-based eating to fight diabetes. I have a few disclosures here. I'm the co-founder of Food and Planet, which is a nonprofit organization promoting sustainable food systems to healthcare practitioners. I'm a nutrition consultant for Oldways, as well as the Tomato Products Wellness Council. I'm nutrition editor for Today's Dietitian and adjunct faculty at Prescott College. So I wanted to start by just telling you a little bit about myself. I call myself the Plant-Powered Dietitian. I've been passionate about the power of plant foods for a long time. The photo on the left is of my father, who grew up on a farm in Minnesota and moved to a farm in Idaho. And my mother grew up on a farm in Arkansas, who moved right next door to my father's farm, and they later married, moved to the Pacific Northwest where I was born. And I've always been passionate about the power of beautiful plant foods, encouraging people to grow them. This is me in my garden in Ojai, California, where I live. Just really connecting people to the beautiful, nutritious power of whole plant foods. So it's exciting because the research is really emerging on this beautiful picture of what a diet should be for promoting health for people suffering from diabetes, not only helping to prevent diabetes from starting in the first place, but managing complications and even reducing the need for medications. So this beautiful diet, according to research, is a plant-based diet, lush with plants in every color of the rainbow, textures, classifications. It's just a beautiful plant-based diet filled with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, pulses, nuts and seeds, spices and herbs. And it's really exciting to see the growing information that we have on this sort of a plant-based diet for diabetes. It's being promoted more and recognized more within our organizations, such as American Diabetes Association, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, CDC, Harvard. They're all really highlighting the benefits of plant-based eating for diabetes. And in fact, my new book, The Plant-Powered Plan to Beat Diabetes, which is just coming out next week, was actually started with the American Diabetes Association contacting me and asking me to write about it because they saw this increasing research coming, and they were really encouraging me to get out there and write more on this and offer more resources. So that was really a learning experience for me over the last 3 years, doing research, interviewing healthcare practitioners, and really digging into the science on plant-based diet for diabetes. So this is a quote from Michelle McMacken. She's the executive director of nutrition and lifestyle medicine at New York City Health and Hospitals. And she's doing amazing work there with her team on plant-based diet and lifestyle for diabetes patients. And her quote is that healthful plant-based diets rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds are powerful for lowering the risk of type 2 diabetes. Moreover, for people who already have type 2, a healthful plant-based diet can not only improve blood sugar and potentially reduce the need for medications, it can lower blood pressure, cholesterol, inflammation, and the risk of serious complications such as heart disease and kidney disease. So I think she really wraps this up kind of neatly about what I'm going to be talking about, that this is where we're at with plant-based diets in diabetes management. So again, looking at how powerful lifestyle is, really setting the stage for diet and lifestyle for diabetes. Research has been showing for a long time that diet and physical activity have this power to really help prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. But now we're seeing growing research that shows that it can even put it into remission, type 2, as well as help manage both type 1 and type 2 if it's already occurred. And again, reduce those risks of chronic diseases and complications that we know come along with diabetes that really can reduce the quality of life that people have. And we see this in the landmark diabetes prevention program that found lifestyle changes could reduce the risk of type 2 in older adults by 71%. So this is very powerful. We know that lifestyle can make a big impact in diabetes. I also wanted to share really quickly that I am including photos from some of my recipes you'll find on my blog at sharonpalmer.com. And I encourage you to check them out. I have a lot of great resources there that you're welcome to use for including more whole plant-based foods in your diet. And I also have a set of references at the end of this presentation. So if you're wanting to know about all the references of the studies I'm talking about, they're all at the very end I'll be sharing. So, when we look at the benefits of plant-based diet for diabetes, it's really, a diet that can work for so many different types of diabetes conditions. So when we're looking at prediabetes, so many people have prediabetes, type 1, type 2, gestational. And then even when we think about people who are walking around who are at high risk of diabetes, there's such a huge amount of our population that can be impacted by diabetes and can really experience the benefits of a plant-based diet to prevent these conditions as well as manage and treat them. So let's look at the science a little bit more on plant-based and diabetes. If you look at the Adventist Health Study 2, which is a beautiful study that was done where they looked at 96,000 participants, and they looked at the different diet patterns because among this cohort, there was a high level of plant-based eating. So they divided up the diets between non-vegetarian, semi-vegetarian, pescatarian, vegetarian, and vegan. And they found these dramatic results among vegans, for example, had a 77% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Vegetarians, a 54% lower risk. These were compared to non-vegetarian. So we've been seeing these studies for a while now that showed that people who ate plant-based diets had a lower risk of getting type 2. And other studies had a similar design. Epic Oxford study is another cohort study where they divided up the diet patterns among population. And this was done in the UK. They found that vegetarians and vegans had a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. In India, another similar study where they looked at different diet patterns among a cohort, and they found vegetarian diets, which included vegan in this study, had lower diabetes risk. And then in Taiwan, very similar results. A similar study where they looked at different diet patterns within a cohort, and they found strong protective effects for vegetarian, which included vegan diets. So this is really consistent where we're seeing people who are eating these plant-based diets have a lower risk of even getting type 2. More science. A more recent review came out that looked at 9 different nutrition studies totaling 300,000 people. They found that people who ate a mostly plant-based diet reduced their risk of diabetes by 23%. So we're still seeing even plant-centric, plant-forward diets have, strong benefits. So research really is showing that if you eat a more healthful version of a plant-based diet, that can even give you greater benefits. So the research is moving. If you see Harvard is doing some of this research where they're actually moving to the quality of the plant-based diet. So not just any plant-based diet, we're seeing greater effects from a whole foods plant-based diet where it's not refined, lower in added sugars, lower in refined grains. We're seeing even better benefits, which of course would make sense. So when we look at the research overall on plant-based diets and their health advantages, we see all of these benefits have been documented by science. We know that people who eat a plant-based diet have lower body weights overall, lower blood glucose levels, lower blood cholesterol and triglyceride levels, lower blood pressure, lower inflammatory levels, and they have reduced risks of type 2 diabetes, as we were talking about, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, stroke, certain types of cancer, obesity, and Alzheimer's disease. So these really do tie in neatly with the picture of diabetes. And when we look at diabetes and our connections with diet and lifestyle, it really boils down to these two main threads that's connecting everything. The researchers are really pinpointing it to obesity and inflammation, these two commonalities that are kind of underlying our increased risk of type 2 diabetes. So inflammation of itself is at a root of these different kinds of chronic diseases: cancer, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, pulmonary diseases, arthritis, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, and diabetes, as we're talking about. So inflammation is at a root of these conditions. And then obesity on its own is a root of many conditions: early death, hypertension, high cholesterol and high triglycerides, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, stroke, gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, types of cancer, and then just general low quality of life, mental health issues and pain. So we can kind of see this overlapping, and you can really kind of highlight some of these things that are particularly relevant to type 2 diabetes, especially when we think about complications that can arise. So other research has shown that when we look at these connections between weight and inflammation and diabetes, for example, BMI of 30 is linked in women to 28 times higher risk of diabetes. BMI of 35, 93 times higher. So weight is a really important issue when it comes to reducing the risk of type 2. Extra body fat, the mechanism of action here is this extra body fat produces higher levels of hormones and inflammation, and this is feeding into insulin resistance, this condition where our bodies are not as sensitive to the insulin, and the body just has to keep producing more insulin to lower those blood glucose levels. So inflammation is at the foundation of so many chronic diseases, as I was showing you, and this is all related to type 2. It's like this chronic cycle. Inflammation occurs, and overweight feeds into diabetes, and this fuels this development of diseases in the tissues, the organs of the body. It's also linked to metabolic syndrome, and this is this clustering of conditions like high blood pressure, glucose, waist circumference, cholesterol, and triglyceride that itself increases the risk of chronic disease. So it's all, this cycle. If we look at more connections between type 2 diabetes and diet, research has found that high intake of soft drinks, red meat, sweets, and fried foods is linked to developing type 2. On the opposite side, more fruits and vegetables, in particular, rich in all of these nutrients that are protective, things like fiber and phytochemicals, can actually protect against developing it as well as managing it. And I think it's really exciting because the American Diabetes Association has recognized and highlighted that self-dietary management is really a key in dealing with diabetes. So it's not just what's happening at the doctor's office, it's what's happening every day with people dealing with diabetes. It's what they're eating, it's how they're moving, it's how they're taking care of themselves. And this really can empower people and really put that control in their hands and how they're going to manage their own health through diet. So I think that's really empowering and exciting for all the people out there who are really facing these issues. So as far as managing diabetes, this is where it's exciting because we've known for a couple of decades that people who eat plant-based diets have a lower risk. But now the research has been moving more towards benefits for managing diabetes with plant-based diets. So research has shown that plant-based eating has shown improvements in diabetes medication management. It can reduce these complications that occur with diabetes. And it has been shown to reduce the need for medication, which is very exciting. It's been shown to improve the ABCs of diabetes, which is A1C, blood pressure, and blood cholesterol, as well as improve body weight and waist circumference. These are really important aspects of diabetes control. And this was found in particular among vegan diets. So among plant-based diets, vegan diets did exceptionally well at this. There was analysis of 6 random controlled trials that found vegetarian diets were linked with a 0.4% greater reduction in A1C. And this was compared to a standard diabetes diet, not even the average diet. So we're starting to see this demonstration of how these diets can be put to use in managing the diabetes once people actually have it. So let's talk about some of these complications, because that's one of the big goals for diabetes is reducing these complications that occur that significantly affect health, the quality of life, productivity. So for example, among type 1 and type 2, 63% of people with type 1 and type 2 suffer from hypertension. 56% have dyslipidemia, which is going to set them up for coronary heart disease. 18% are obese. More than half die of cardiovascular disease, especially heart disease and stroke. It raises the risk for Alzheimer's and certain cancers. And we know that it can damage the kidneys, the eyes, the nerves. It's a major cause of blindness and limb amputation. So this is something very real that if we can help people with their lifestyle, we can have great benefits. One of the big things is protecting the heart. We know we have to help people protect their heart when they're diagnosed with diabetes. And one of the longstanding benefits of a plant-based diet has been heart health. That's something we've been seeing for a long, long time. So it just makes sense that a more plant-based diet is going to help people reduce that risk of heart disease that comes along with diabetes. So studies show that up to 32% reduction in ischemic heart disease has been found with vegetarian diet patterns. And I like to point out the Dean Ornish lifestyle program, he's demonstrated success in his lifestyle program, which includes a plant-based diet, along with things like exercise and stress reduction. And he was able to show lowering of LDL without medication by 20%, decreasing plaque buildup in the heart arteries by almost 8%, and a reduction in cardiac events by 60%. So that's pretty powerful stuff. And really exciting is the work that Neil Barnard's been doing, and he's published some of this research on healthy plant-based diets, vegan diets based on whole foods. And he was able to show that among people with type 2 diabetes, they improved their beta cell function, they improved their insulin resistance, blood glucose levels, and cholesterol levels. And this is super exciting. They were able to get off oral meds and insulin after 25 days on the program. So this is newer research, and I think we need a lot more research in this area. But I think it's really promising to see that we can achieve some of these benefits with this eating program. And his program also included exercise too. So there's even more. Plant-based diets have been linked with half the rate of hypertension. So that's exciting. That's at high risk for people suffering from diabetes. 35% lower LDL cholesterol in some studies, lower levels of inflammatory markers. Even research is showing less diabetic neuropathy. It's improved by eating a plant-based diet. Even protection from kidney disease with a plant-based diet. So exciting stuff. So what is it in the whole plant foods that could be helping people with diabetes or who are at risk for diabetes? And I like to point to the fact that when we're eating whole plants, we're getting all of this good stuff, all the healthy stuff. And some of these are unique to the plant kingdom. Things like fiber, phytochemicals, these are unique to plants. Low glycemic carbs, these whole plant foods have slow digesting carbs that do not produce the dramatic shifts in blood glucose levels. They also have unique vitamins and minerals. They have healthy fats. So these are all unique in this group of foods, and they can be, one of the underlying benefits of eating more plant-based diets. Plus, they are low in the things that we are trying to limit in our diets. Things like saturated fat, dietary cholesterol, sodium. And we also know of toxins that are being produced in the cooking, curing, and processing of meats. These have been identified in recent years, and they could be behind some of the negative impacts from high meat diets, in particular red meat and processed meat. So whether it's nitroso compounds, PAHs, AEGs, these are all related to the curing and the cooking and the processing of meats. This has been something of discussion as maybe one of the mechanisms of action behind these negative impacts. Even heme iron has been getting more attention as to another potential mechanism of action. Heme iron being high in red meat and linked to the production of nitroso compounds, which can raise disease risk. So when we look at these plant-based foods, we know that plants work individually. So those blueberries on this plate, on their own, they have individual benefits. But we know that when plant foods are combined into a beautiful meal with whole grains, green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, now we get a synergistic benefit. So it's not just the sum of the parts, it's actually a synergistic and amplified benefit from eating plant-based foods. We know that they're higher in fiber, they're lower in heme iron, they have fewer calories, less saturated fat, less dietary cholesterol, and this higher intake of phytochemicals. The phytochemicals are very exciting because we know they have antioxidant activity, anti-inflammatory activity that's very important to get in the diet and could be a significant game changer for people with diabetes. So all of these nutrients from plant foods, they are linked to this overall profile of health, lower inflammation, healthier weight, better glucose control, reduced inflammation, greater insulin sensitivity, and this lower risk of disease development and progression. So let's talk a little bit about insulin sensitivity, because the new research is showing that plant foods can actually promote insulin sensitivity. So this is something we're trying to really achieve in diabetes management, to make the body more sensitive to its insulin so that we're not constantly having to produce more insulin to manage that load of blood glucose. So, when we're normally eating our food, the blood glucose levels rise and the pancreas responds by producing that insulin. But in insulin resistance, those cells just are not responding to that insulin. And so more and more is produced, and that's leading to type 2 diabetes. So we want to be more sensitive to our insulin and reduce insulin resistance. Research is showing that plant foods have the ability to promote greater insulin sensitivity. They have been found to protect the beta cells in the pancreas, which is part of insulin production. They can lower the body weight and waist circumference and reduce blood pressure, cholesterol, and inflammation. And this is all part of feeding into insulin sensitivity. So when we look on the right here, these are some of the at-risk conditions for insulin resistance. So, if you're overweight or obese, if you're age 45 or older, just that age puts you at risk for insulin resistance. if you have a family history of diabetes, if particular cultural backgrounds have a higher risk, low physical activity, high blood pressure, abnormal blood cholesterol levels, a history of gestational diabetes, a history of heart disease or stroke, PCOS, metabolic syndrome, even medications and hormonal disorders and sleep problems. These all set you up at risk for insulin resistance. So when you look at this list, you're looking at a huge percentage of the population that are at risk for insulin resistance. Thus, they're at risk for type 2 diabetes. So when we look at plants, they're rich in phytochemicals. And as I was saying, this adds to their anti-inflammatory capacity because these phytochemicals, they're the natural defense of the plant. Scientists believe they were developed in the plant because they had to find a way to protect themselves from the predators, from environmental insults, whether it's damage from the sun or pests. But plants just couldn't get up and run away from these threats. So they had to develop a defense system, and that is phytochemicals. They're often concentrated in the outer surface of the plant food to protect the plant. They can be sunscreen for the plant. They can help protect from viruses and pests. And we know that there are thousands of phytochemicals present in plants, more to be discovered all the time. And when humans eat these phytochemicals, we're gaining benefits as well. We know that they can reduce oxidative stress and inflammation in the body. So when we're looking towards eating a more anti-inflammatory diet, this can be part of that beautiful diet to help manage diabetes as well as prevent it. We're looking at this anti-inflammatory diet pattern. So when we look at this diet pattern, it has a lot of variety of foods. This is one thing I'm constantly trying to work on is greater diversity of foods because we're really limiting how many plant foods we're eating. When you think that there are 300,000 edible species of plants in the planet, but yet we're basically only consuming about 150 to 200 species around the world, we could be doing so much more. So really promoting more diversity, a greater variety of vegetables and fruits, more whole grains, more pulses, more beans and lentils, more spices and herbs, really trying to get that variety. That means you're getting more, a variety of phytochemicals, a variety of micronutrients. That's an important part. Low in refined and low nutrient foods. Research has shown that this diet pattern that's rich in refined foods and red meat, sugars, saturated fats is a pro-inflammatory diet, while an anti-inflammatory diet is one that's rich in things like those fruits and vegetables, whole grains and nuts. So we want to really focus on avoiding the refined foods, which is also an important part of that diabetes diet. High in fruits and vegetables, balanced in calories, because the goal is to have optimal weight. So balancing the calories, focusing on healthful carbs, those slow digesting, low glycemic carbohydrates. That's what we're finding in the high fiber carbohydrate sources, low in animal proteins, and includes plant proteins such as pulses, beans, lentils, peas, soy foods, nuts, and seeds. A focus on healthful fats, the unsaturated fats, omega-3 fats, rich in spices and herbs, tea consumption, that's been linked with reduced inflammation, and alcohol, if it's consumed, moderate, and then even small amounts of dark chocolate as part of this healthy indulgence. So this kind of style of eating just flows right into that plant-based eating style for diabetes. So also another exciting frontier is diabetes in the gut. And we know that there's this teeming environment of microbes that reside in our gut. It's the gut microbiome, trillions of microbes. There are 300 to 500 different types, and they perform multiple functions in our body. We each have our unique gut microbiome. It's as unique as our fingerprint. And it's influenced by so many things: our mother's microbiota, our environment, our diet, our lifestyle. So you have your bacteria throughout your entire body, but those that are in your gut, in your intestinal tract, those have so much impacts when it comes to your overall well-being. And we're learning more and more about how the gut interacts with diabetes in many, many ways. Well, one thing that we know is that overweight and obese people have a different profile of gut microbes than do lean people. So your weight influences your gut, which in turn influences your metabolism. So the rate of how you're using energy can be influenced by that microbiome. It's kind of a cruel trick of nature that if you're struggling with your weight and you're overweight, that could actually feed into a lower metabolic rate. So studies have shown that fecal transplants from lean people to insulin resistant people showed metabolic improvements. So we know that there are some connections there between metabolism and the gut. So it's also important to know that it affects our immune system and inflammation. And the really cool thing is that the gut microbiome does really well with a plant-based diet high in fiber that nourishes the gut. It creates a healthier gut profile with a lower amount of the pathogenic microbes and a higher amount of the beneficial microbes. So more and more research is looking at plant-based diet patterns and that gut microbiome profile that's more beneficial. It also is an important part of producing short-chain fatty acids that have their own benefits in reducing inflammation and chronic disease risk. So this whole gut connection is really growing, and it's a very intriguing part of the benefit of plant-based diets for diabetes. So fiber just comes right in here because fiber is part of that discussion on the gut microbiome, and it has lots of benefits for diabetes. You know, the gut, as we're talking about, which also impacts the immune system, but it also has benefits for weight, inflammation, glucose control, heart health, reducing risks of certain cancers, reducing the impact of the metabolic syndrome, and satiety. So when we're eating high fiber foods, there are benefits all the way from eating those foods in your mouth all the way through digestion, because we gain satiety even from the chewing aspects of eating high fiber foods all the way through. So there's just so many benefits for type 2 diabetes in particular. High fiber diets can improve the glucose control, and it decreases hyperinsulinemia. It lowers LDL. So it has these benefits. And in particularly when we think about satiety and weight, that it can help us control our weight, it can boost that gut microbiome. There's just a lot of benefits. So even the CDC is recommending fiber as an important aspect in managing diabetes because of all of these multiple benefits. So what are the kings and queens of fiber? It's those plant-based foods, in particular pulses, beans, lentils, peas, whole grains. These are really rich in fibers that are part of this beautiful disease-protected plant-based diet. So I also wanted to point out this connection to indigenous traditional diets. So when we look around the world, so many diet patterns that we see that are linked with lower disease risk, lower type 2 diabetes risk, are plant-based. So whether these are some gathering of some photos of different traditional diets around the world that I've observed, whether you're in Japan or the Sacred Valley of Peru or Greece or Puerto Rico here, you can see these traditional diets that are filled with whole plant foods. And a lot of times you'll see a local whole grain. That could be quinoa in Peru. It could be brown rice in India. You'll see local legumes. That could be chickpeas in the Middle East, or it could be black beans in Central America. Lots of seasonal cultivated and foraged fruits and vegetables. So we're, all of these vegetables that are part of that region, they're grown locally. They're even foraged in forests still, and grown in backyard gardens, available in local markets. That's a big part of the diet. There's usually a seed and nut, whether it's sesame seeds in Africa or peanuts, minimally processed. These are diets based on whole foods. Very few foods are packaged or refined, and a low use of animal foods. So we see this among traditional diet patterns, that have a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. So I think it's an important connection and really a way to highlight the beauty of diet patterns. So there are a few different diet patterns I just wanted to mention. And I think it's important to note that there are traditional diet patterns that have health benefits all around the world. Some haven't had the pleasure of being studied yet or documented, but we do see these commonalities and we see benefits for chronic diseases and diabetes. For example, the traditional Nordic diet, there's research here now, and this diet pattern has an emphasis on regional fruits, vegetables, seafood as a major animal protein, whole grains, healthy unsaturated oils, and low red meat intake. That has been linked with reduced chronic disease risk. The traditional Japanese diet, rich in soy foods, fruits, lots of vegetables, fermented foods, green tea, fish as the main animal protein, low intake of animal fat and meat. The traditional Mediterranean diet, tons of research on the benefits for diabetes and chronic disease risk, a focus on beans, whole grains, lots of vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, and fish as the main animal protein. And then I wanted to highlight the blue zones, which is from the work of Dan Buettner, who identified these locations around the world where they had the greatest number of centenarians, people who live 100 or more. And he identified these places: Ikaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, the Nicoya coast of Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California, where I studied nutrition. And he identified these locations as having lower rates of chronic diseases, including diabetes. So one of the commonalities of those blue zones is that they ate a primarily plant-based diet. Among other things too, physical activity, social support were there too. But these were all traditional diets, and they were linked with long life and lower rates of disease, including type 2. So there is a spectrum of plant-based eating, and I wanted to share the Oldways vegetarian and vegan diet pyramid here on the right. And you can see just how you would plan a healthy plant-based diet, where the big swath of fruits and vegetables is the foundation, whole grains, pulses, things like beans, peas, lentils, as well as soy, those nuts and peanuts and seeds, herbs, spices, and healthy oils, and for vegetarians, the dairy products. So this is really looking at a healthful vegetarian and vegan diet, but there is a spectrum of plant-based eating that can range from 100% plant-based, such as vegan, to vegetarian, which would include eggs and milk and dairy products, to pescatarian, which would include seafood, all the way to semi-vegetarian or flexitarian. And we see benefits along this spectrum. So people can gain benefits from moving more to a plant-based diet as part of their diabetes management or prevention. So this idea of flexitarianism is really growing. We're seeing it more and more, that people are interested in reducing their animal food intake. They don't want to commit 100%, but they really want to move towards that plant-based goal of eating and have smaller amounts. So that's an exciting movement too. So as I mentioned earlier, the newer research is showing that quality really counts, because after all, soda, chips, cookies, and candy can be vegan. Refined crackers and white bread can be vegan. But the research is now teasing out a healthy plant-based diet pattern versus an unhealthy. The healthy being based on whole foods, beans, whole grains, lots of fruits and vegetables. The unhealthy pattern being more refined, more sugar, more refined grains. So we're finding that quality, the higher quality plant-based diet has better effects. And of course, we would expect that. So it's really exciting to see a shift now towards the quality of diets. So let's talk about putting a plant-based diet into action. We're looking at creating a healthy meal, a healthy plate that includes plant proteins. That would be things like pulses, nuts and seeds, soy foods, meat alternatives, whole grains or starchy vegetables, lots of non-starchy vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, And then this addition of spices, herbs, a little piece of dark chocolate, and our beverages. Beverages are a huge part. So I have kind of a chart here that shows some of those food groups and what they would be as we're starting to plan a balanced diet. So, looking at the servings of pulses, tofu, seitan, meat alternatives, soy milk, nuts and seeds, these could be your protein sources. Then you've got your whole grains, your non-starchy vegetables, and then fruits, your healthy fats, and then some of these foods like herbs and spices, coffee and tea, an ounce of dark chocolate. Among the vegetable category, I wanted to highlight a few because, of course, we know all vegetables are healthy. We should all have more of them, but there are a few that I think deserve a little highlighting that people could promote a little bit more frequently. So dark green leafy vegetables, I like to recommend this every day on plant-based diets because of the important nutrients they have, but they really are super dense, nutrient-packed vegetables. Whether it's kale or romaine lettuce, spinach, chard, mustard greens, those are really important vegetables that we should get on our diet in our diets more often. I like to recommend that more frequently. Tomatoes a few times a week because they do have that lycopene that's really protective for many different conditions. Mushrooms are really growing in knowledge about their special nutrient profile, their fibers. They have unique compounds, bacteria, yeasts, and molds that are doing interesting things that I think are important for immune function. Cruciferous vegetables I like to highlight. This huge family like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, so many vegetables in this category, but they have those glucosinolates that are linked to greater benefits as well. So I like to kind of highlight these, although it's important for us to really get that diverse array of vegetables for diabetes as well. So this is kind of a plant-based approach to creating a diabetes plate method. The diabetes plate method is a simple idea of how to plan a balanced meal on a plate. So this is how that would kind of translate over when you're looking at a plant-based version, where you've got half of your plate with non-starchy vegetables, a fourth of your plate with either whole grain starchy vegetables or fruits, and a fourth of your plant-based protein. And then on the side, we have things like those healthy additions. We want to drink more water. We want to have more spices and herbs, coffee or tea, dark chocolate occasionally. A focus on healthy plant fats, things like avocados, nuts, seeds, olives, olive oil, and then supplements for those who need it. We want to make sure we're getting enough vitamin D through fortified foods if you're eating a plant-based diet, or the sunshine. B12 is important as well. So this is kind of that plate method of planning a healthy, balanced diet. Also, smart snacking is part of that healthy diet. And I like to recommend a plant-based snack that has a protein plus a high fiber carb without the addition of added sugars or refined grains. So something like hummus with snow peas, or cucumbers, nut butter with pear slices, a plant-based yogurt that has protein in it, maybe with some fresh berries, a slice of whole grain toast with tahini, or a small corn tortilla with a little baked tofu. Those are examples of some snacks that you could select. So talking a little bit about meeting those nutrient needs, if people are moving towards a plant-based diet and we want to make sure they're meeting their needs, some areas of concern that we need to make sure people are getting enough is calcium, which is possible on a completely plant-based diet because we do have sources like tofu, tahini, cruciferous vegetables, and pulses. But that's an important thing to keep an eye on to make sure you're getting enough. Possibly the need for a supplement depending on someone's intake. Vitamin D, as I mentioned, of course, that's the sunshine vitamin, but we can get it through fortified foods as well, as many people do. Even mushrooms that are exposed to light can have vitamin D. B12, I recommend supplementation if people are on a completely plant-based diet or even near completely plant-based diet. In order to make sure you're getting your needs, 250 micrograms a day is what a lot of health experts are recommending. Iodine can be a concern. Seaweed is a very good source of iodine. It can be a high source, and even something like iodized salt can help people meet their needs. Zinc, you can get zinc from sources like beans, nuts, and whole grains. So the same thing for iron, you can get it from beans and whole grains. So it's possible, but we really need to make sure that diet is packed with these whole plant foods that we're talking about, a really diverse diet with those nuts, seeds, whole grains, lentils, beans, green leafy vegetables, fruits, all these things that we know that are going to help people meet their nutrient needs. So I wanted to just kind of leave it with this conversation that I actually got this quote when I was doing research for my book from Madhu Gadia, who's a plant-based diabetes expert. And she said, plant-based diets, when planned properly, can meet your nutritional needs, help you balance your blood sugars, manage diabetes. A well-executed plant-based meal with whole grains for carbohydrate and energy, vegetables for vitamins and minerals, and dried beans, peas, lentils, nuts, and seeds for protein is easy and delicious. Plant-based diets are high in fiber, which help maintain blood sugars. So I wanted to remind everybody about all those beautiful edible plant species on the planet, and each has a story to help nourish and heal our bodies. So I hope that this can help you start your plant-based journey with your community, the people that you're working with, and that you can help inspire them to start, introducing more plant-based diets, whether it's to help them prevent it or manage it along the way, even like starting with more of a flexitarian approach, and helping people if they're interested in various plant-based diet patterns, understanding the nuances of those diet patterns in order to help them. So thank you very much. I wanted to also share my references with you, and I think Kelly can probably get those to you later. I do have 2 slides with all the references from some of the scientific research that I was presenting. And you're welcome to follow me and my social media, sign up for any of my free newsletters and resources. And I love to share those with you if you need them, and reach out to me if you have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for that wonderful presentation. It was so great hearing everything and all the research. And as Sharon mentioned, keep an eye on your email. We'll send you these slides as well as the video recording and the CPEU certificate for dietitians, if not tomorrow, by early next week, I would say. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And yeah, we had a ton of questions come in, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to everyone. But I would say we had a lot of questions about heme iron. Could you maybe elaborate on what's the concern there, or what is the research telling us?
Well, I think that we don't really know all the answers yet. We just have observed that high intakes of heme iron has been linked with negative impacts. And one of the discussions is that heme iron is very easily absorbed. So unlike non-heme iron, plant iron, where it's not as easily absorbed, it could be a problem because the levels can be high. And when we eat such high meat diets, we're getting a lot of it, and it's easily absorbed. And that has been linked to the production of nitroso compounds. So that's kind of what I'm reading in the research. I think we really don't know all the answers, but it's when you read more and more about this discussion about what is behind the negative impacts of eating high levels of red meat, that's coming up more and more in the literature. So I think we need to stay tuned and see what's happening. Of course, on the other hand, iron is important. Iron deficiency has negative impacts. We don't want iron deficiency. However, it's this high level of heme iron in Western diets where we're getting so much. The U.S. has the highest consumption of red meat, intake in the planet. That could be the problem. So we're going to learn more about that in the future.
Thank you. The landmark diabetes prevention study that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, that showed the 71% reduction. Was that with weight loss or without weight loss?
And I have to go back and look at that study. I'm sure that their weight loss was one of the outcomes of that study. So it probably did influence that 71% reduction, but I'd have to go back and actually read it. And I did include that study in the reference slide. So when you get the references, you can go look up that citation too. But I would kind of think that weight loss was part of that outcome.
Do you see a pathway for eating patterns that are plant-based, but include some lean meats and fish? Is there a benefit there?
I think that's a great question, because as I was mentioning, there's a spectrum of plant-based diets. And even though some of the research I shared was done on 100% plant-based diets, some of it was plant-forward diets. We see benefits with the Mediterranean diet. So I think, it really depends on where you're working. I think that the main thing we need to work on is getting more of these plant-based foods in the diet pattern. If you have someone who's really interested in trying, 100% plant-based diet to see what kind of benefits they get, then I think we can work with that. But if you're working with someone who wants to make more of a gradual shift, I think that's great. I think it's really about reducing the amount and significantly reducing the amount, because so many people are consuming such high levels, and then favoring the more healthful options. For example, seafood is linked with better outcomes. So I think we can work with our clients individually to achieve those benefits.
Can you talk about the meat alternatives, such as products like Beyond Meat, and their role in plant-based eating with health?
That's such a great question. I think it's really interesting to know that meat alternatives have been around a long time. I think some of us think about the new meat alternatives like it's all new, but the meat alternatives were part of the Adventist health study. For over 100 years, that population has been eating meat alternatives. And so some of the citations that I gave about the Adventist health study, those were people eating meat alternatives. Of course, they were eating a lot of beans and lentils and whole grains and fruits and vegetables, but they were also eating meat alternatives. So, of course, a meat alternative is not the same thing as a plate of lentils and brown rice and kale, but I think they can serve a place in helping people try to eat more plant-based. They do have less cholesterol. Some product, they all have different nutrient profiles. Some have less saturated fat, some have the same amount as meat. So I think helping, choosing some meat alternatives that help can be a way people can eat more plant-based, but the goal is to eat more of these whole plant foods.
Great. There is a thought that vegan, vegetarian, and plant-based diets are high in carbohydrates. How do we address that? And is that a concern for diabetes?
That's a really great question. And I think that was some of the surprising information from the new research that, like, for example, the research that Neil Barnard did, it didn't even matter how many carbohydrates they were eating. Because, he found these benefits without even counting carbs. So, because the thing is that there was so much fiber in the diet. There was, on average, they were promoting 40 grams of fiber in the diet. So, the impacts of the carbohydrates were much gentler. There wasn't such a glycemic response. So, there is some thought that a really minimally processed whole foods plant-based diet like this could really make that carbohydrate discussion not so relevant. I still think we need a lot more research in that area. And I think when we work with clients, we have to do it on an individual basis. I'm on the diabetes plate. I have the carbohydrate a little bit more managed by having the non-starchy vegetables, filling half the plate, and then having 1/4 of the plate with the higher carbohydrate sources, and then 1/4 of the plate with the plant proteins to kind of manage the carbohydrate a little better. And I think that might be, an alternative that might work for a lot of people.
Thanks. Do you have suggestions on ways to increase plant proteins for breakfast options for the elderly?
Wow, what a good question. So, some of the plant proteins that I like to recommend are like beans. Like you can make a breakfast burrito, or you can have like an English breakfast, which is baked beans with toast and like baked mushrooms or a baked tomato on the side. Um, you can have like soy milk is a good source of protein on cereal. You can add chopped nuts, peanut butter, and oatmeal. That might be well tolerated with that population. But it's also getting creative. Like I make a scrambled tofu that's kind of an egg replacement where you crumble tofu, add a little turmeric, and it really tastes like scrambled eggs. So that might be a nice alternative as well.
We have a recipe on the Oldways site using a silken tofu in like a smoothie, and that could be
Oh, I
nice
love
too
that.
for people who might have chewing issues or
That's a great idea. Yeah, love that.
um, has research of plant-based diets shown improvement with lowering A1C levels when their type 2 diabetes is due to hereditary factors? Do we know that?
The research, I don't know if they teased out that level of nuance in the research that I've read, but they have shown improvements in A1C. So we know that, but I don't think they looked at that level within the population that they were studying. That's a good question.
Um, This question's from a dietitian who works with individuals who want a healthy diet without the gas that increasing healthy foods sometimes leads to. Are there any new breakthroughs in dealing with this side effect?
Yeah, that's another great question. I hear that from people a lot. In particular, the compounds that are found in pulses that can, the oligosaccharides and just even the fiber content. When you're starting a diet like this, you're increasing your fiber, especially pulses and grains, and you can have GI discomfort. However, research shows that you can get used to it. You can reduce your symptoms, you can increase your tolerance to fiber. What I like to recommend is going slowly. I don't know if there's any new breakthrough so much. It's kind of the same things that we've been talking about, but I do recommend going slowly. Like if people are, eating 15 grams of fiber and we're trying to get them to 40, we want to kind of do that slowly. Like maybe you don't want to put beans and cauliflower and whole grains on the same plate right off the start. Maybe you want to just do one at a time, slowly build up the fiber, make sure there's a lot of water. There's also, of course, things like sprouting and soaking your beans really well when you're cooking them. Straining away that water, adding fresh water is important. Soaking and sprouting whole grains have made them more digestible. Same thing with beans. Cooking them thoroughly. Those are all things you can do to kind of make them more digestible.
Thanks. And then I think we have time for one more question. So Sharon, could you recommend any movies, documentaries, YouTube channels, or whatnot to learn about the benefits of a plant-based diet for non-plant-based eaters or people who are early on in their journey?
Wow, that's a good question too. I know that there's the Forks Over Knives people have done some interesting documentaries, and they've been around for a while. And I think they have good experts in there. You can also, there are a lot of books. If you're looking for dietitians who've written really great stuff, Jenny Messina has written wonderful stuff on plant-based eating. Very highly referenced, very credible. Brenda Davis is another one who's written a lot of great stuff. Jack Norris has an amazing website, very science-based. These are all dietitians who have that expertise in plant-based. I would highly recommend checking them out too.
Awesome. And yeah, and please do also follow Sharon, and I know she'll have If you keep an eye on her page, her new book on this topic is coming out next week, is it? Or
Yes, on the 16th.
exciting.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, keep on your eye on your email, if not tomorrow, early next week, and we'll send you more info. And thank you so much, Sharon, for joining us.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye.